What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode. And this week I'm bringing a guest on to interview. And this guest comes all the way from California in the US. Now, Alen Siebenaler is his name. And Alen has been a real estate investor and an agent for over 20 years. So he's got some great insights. And what he's also got some insights into is investing outside of your local territory. Now, this is something that I often question whether it's worth the hassle, and that is some of the insight that we get into today. Yes, you're going to find good bargains in some of these locations, but if you don't have local knowledge, that can be costly. And also, you have to wonder, is the lack of local knowledge worth the amount, like the discount you get for the deal, is it worth the hassle that could come about? Alen has some interesting stories that he's going to tell us today. So I think you're going to find this one interesting no matter where you're listening in from. There are some great insights, particularly around mindset and self-limiting beliefs. So without further ado, my conversation with Alen Siebenaler. Alen Siebenaler, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Alen, it's great to have you on. And it's not often we get to talk to somebody who is all the way over in California, sunny California, I'm assuming. I see the surfboard behind you there. So you're obviously a surfer. And we might get into some stories about that. But for the people who are listening in, we have quite an international audience all the way, to Australia and Singapore and stuff. And then obviously I'm in here in Ireland and we've got people listening in the UK, but you're based in the US. So can you just give us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I am a 23-year-old real estate investor and real estate agent. I've been living here in California for longer than that. I grew up actually in the Midwest in St. Louis, Missouri, mostly. So right smack dab in the middle of the country. But I got to come out here to California to go to university. And once I moved to the coast, I just, stayed. So I've been along the coast here, basically between Malibu. I went to Pepperdine in Malibu. And then now I'm in Santa Barbara, which is about 90 minutes north of Malibu in Los Angeles, right on the coast. And yeah, it's home. It's a beautiful spot.
Yeah, I have relatives living in, I think it's Manhattan Beach. So it's down the road a bit. And so, Alen, when you say you're 23, so you're a 23-year veteran, you would say. You're not 23 years old.
Correct.
And tell us, if you can take us back to the early days. I always like to kind of give a bit of context because we got a lot of different people listening in, and, describe young Alen coming out of school and, what got you interested in the idea of investing in property?
Yeah, I got into property investing basically to take financial control in my life, or have some financial control, you could say, because when I was growing up, my dad worked his way up in a factory. So he started at 18 years old driving the forklift. And then his whole life, he worked his way up in this factory job. And then when he was middle-aged, the company that owned the factories, a national company, got bought out by another company. And I was a senior in high school trying to figure out college and a lot of big life decisions. And when his company got bought out, they laid off all the managers. And so he lost his job. It was also a recession then. And so he did not have a college degree either. So he, devoted his life to this company and then got laid off when the company got bought out. And then we just had no idea, it was kind of a mess. And I was trying to figure out college. And I remember just how difficult that was. And I was starting to learn about business as I was starting to move towards college. I was learning about investing. I got into learning about real estate because I had a friend whose dad did really well investing, and he was also a broker. And so I did an internship with him. And I was really hungry to just learn how to have my own business and investments, I guess. And then that led to me eventually stumbling into the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which I read. And that changed a lot of my thinking in terms of investing. And from there, I'm just like, I'm all in. I got my real estate license and I just started working in commercial real estate because I wanted to work for basically investors. My clients were all investors. They were buying commercial properties, and I was just learning a ton. Starting in commercial real estate, I did not make a lot of money because I was really low on the totem pole, but the knowledge that I gained was worth way more than what they could have paid me. So I started that way and eventually branched off on my own as an agent and then as an investor.
Interesting. Yeah, very pivotal when a family member loses his job like that, and you're kind of like you're witnessing it as a child, but a grown up child, I guess, and you're kind of like saying, "Whoa, that's not going to be happening to me, hopefully."
Right.
But it's tough. Yeah, I've seen a lot of people that I've spoken to have had similar kind of influences that have really pushed them into that. And tell me this, like in terms of getting your real estate license in the US, what's involved in that? Is that difficult to get, or is it an easy process?
I wouldn't call it easy, but I also wouldn't call it difficult. So, what's interesting is it's divided by state. So depends what state you are in. Some states are just, I would say, super easy, and other states are a bit more difficult. California, where I am, seems to make everything difficult. So everything's more complicated in California, more litigious, more, and so it takes a bit, but it's just a process of going through the classes and then eventually taking an exam. I'd say it takes 6 months maximum if you're really going for it. And the complicated part then is actually, doing the business and getting up and going. Your first few years can be hard, but getting the license varies very much by state.
And tell me that, yeah, and you mentioned when I was reading your backstory, you've done business in like 9 states or something like that. And do you need to have a license in each of those states to do that?
Great question. No, you don't. So as an investor, as an agent, you do, or like as an agent, if I'm helping someone sell a property in another state, then I can partner with an agent that does have a license in that state.
Right.
But as an investor, I can do business in any state. I can buy properties as the investor, obviously, and I can sell them even as the investor. But when it's an out-of-state property, I'll use an agent anyways. But yeah.
Local knowledge and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
And tell me, Alan, would you describe yourself today? I mean, are your principal activities investment today, or are you still working as an agent?
I'm doing both. I'm absolutely doing both. I'm working as an investor, and I teach and share, kind of like we're doing today on that side of things. I work as an agent as well. But I am more and more, I've always been more and more steering into the investing side and the teaching side. And that's what we get to have fun with today. Yeah. But that's really where my heart is. I originally got my license as an agent to learn the investing side, right? So you could see it was always my intent to be on that side as much as possible. And to be honest, the more you're on the investing side of things, the more control you have over so much, over your schedule, over your life, et cetera. When you're strictly working as a real estate agent, you are somewhat of a slave to your client's needs, right? Yeah. And so as you get more and more financial stability on the investing side, you can pick and choose what you're going to do as an agent, right? Yeah. But if you have no stability, no financial wherewithal on the investing side, and your sole source of income is working as an agent, then you're pretty much taking whatever comes your way. And sometimes that can be a little rough, and but that's how you get started. And then as you advance, you can pick and choose your clients and what you're going to work on and what you're not.
And tell me, Alan, in terms of, I mean, that transition from agent to investor, like, describe that time when I presume you got a big enough commission as an agent that you were able to make your first step into investing.
Yeah, kind of. It helps. I mean, for my personal story, my first transaction, which we can dig into, was a condo in Los Angeles in Culver City. And at the time, my wife and I had started with property management. So we were getting like a reduced rent apartment in a nice apartment building in Santa Monica. And we were helping manage the building. We were the resident managers. So we lived in the building. They gave us a kickback on the rent, and then we just helped lease units. We helped supervise some of the maintenance. It was a great learning experience for us. We worked directly for the investors that owned the building, and they were a really nice couple. And so it was a great situation. Well, then we started saving some of that money that we were saving on rent. We started sacking it aside, and then we started looking for our first place. And that first place, I did have, actually, I didn't have my license yet. I was working on getting it. And the agent that represented us was horrible. They were so bad. They were like pressuring us into buying things we didn't want to buy, and they would get emotional, and they were just a wreck. And I remember thinking, gosh, if they can survive as a real estate agent, I'm sure I could. But that was our first purchase, and I got approved originally. This was back when you could do 0 down loans. I got approved for a 0 down loan, but then last minute, like 3 days before closing, the bank switched it on me and said, no, you need to come up with 5% down. And I panicked because I didn't have a lot of money. And then I, my grandma chipped in a few $1,000s, and I found a few thousand that I was going to save from my tax savings on buying the place. I was going to get a tax benefit. So I pulled it together. That was my first place. But then on our second place, which was a few years later, I did have my real estate license, and that did help because I represented myself on buying it, and I got paid a commission to buy it. So that did help a bit.
So the person who was selling it paid you a commission?
Correct.
Oh, wow.
Even though I was the buyer and the agent representing myself.
Okay. That's an interesting twist on it. Yeah, I like it.
So it did help a bit.
Yeah. And I mean, in terms of the those first few deals, like, were they just simply, move in, it's a place to buy and rent? Did you have to fix it up? Did you have to do any of that kind of work?
Yeah, we had to fix them. Everything almost that we've ever bought, we've had to do some.
So it's all about adding value. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And that's what we were looking for. So the first place, the condo, had a really good layout to it. What I call bones. It had good bones. It had 2 patios. So it had a patio off the bedroom and a patio off the living room. And the complex it was in was nice. It was also top floor. So it had a good view and lots of natural light. But on the inside of it, it was like 1970s, right? Like, just horrible ceilings and lights, and everything was bad. The flooring was horrible. So that was all just cosmetic that we could fix up. But the layout to it was just right, that once it was fixed out, it just had a really wonderful feel to it. And then we fixed it up while we lived in it, and lived in it for like a year. Then we moved out of it and rented it out.
Right. Wow. Okay. Nice. And then over time, I'm curious, when you say about the timing, the 0% down, did you get burned in 2008?
I did not get burned in 2008. So
lucky man.
Well, I did on one deal. I'll explain that one. So fortunately, in 2006, around there, I actually started feeling uncomfortable financially with my real estate investments. They had gone up in value significantly, and I was not getting cash flow from them. I was not. Right. The equity, which is typical in California, the equity had boomed, but the rent and the expenses were somewhat of a break even. Maybe I was making a little bit of money, and I started feeling uncomfortable about that. And so I felt like potentially something was going to go wrong, but I thought it was for me. I had like that sixth sense going. And so I sold that condo I was telling you about, sold it for double what I bought it for.
Nice.
And I did a 1031 exchange into a 12 unit in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So a 1031 exchange, for those that aren't familiar, means that I sold it, put the gain all went into an escrow account at an accommodator, and then it went into the next property, which means I did not touch the money, so I did not have to pay tax on the gain. It went from one property to the next, and I moved from 1 unit to 12, and so that dramatically helped my cash flow. So,
and also your risk has been completely de-risked, because you now have 1/12
exactly
of the risk exposure. Yeah,
exactly. And so then, as the market did eventually, go down 2008 and 9, it didn't matter because I had a lot of good rental income coming in on that property. So the value of the property did not matter to me at all because I wasn't selling. But what did matter is how much rent was coming in, and the rent did not go down at all during the recession. And so that was a stroke of genius. And I did that again in 2007 with the 4-unit. I bought a 4-unit also in Culver City, and I sold that and 1031 exchanged into a 48-unit in Texas.
48. Wow. That's a big jump. Yeah.
So those were both brilliant moves. But the mistake was I also bought land in Texas. Fortunately, it was just a little piece of land, but I bought it in the area I was buying it in. These land values were skyrocketing. They were just going up and up and up and up. Well, what goes down the fastest during a recession is land. And I learned that lesson hard. I bought it for like 100,000, but it went down during the recession to probably 35 or 40, right? And so I just had to suffer through it and hold on to that piece of land. But the multifamily, the rents did not change during the recession. Actually, in Texas, they went up because they struck some oil down there, and I had oil workers coming down, and we started furnishing some of the units for them and renting furnished units. But yeah, that was, both a mistake I made and then some strokes of genius as well that happened to just
fortuitous, at least. Yeah. You didn't see the crash coming because it was personal to you. You just thought this was prudent. Smart move. I wish I could say the same. I went through a massive roller coaster ride in 2008. Alan, I'd love to ask you about you mentioned before we went on air that you've had some experiences with violent squatters and gangs and things like that. Tell us that story. I'm interested to hear more.
Yeah, absolutely. So during the recession, now that we've kind of led to that part of the story, I was buying properties from banks, and I was also traveling and teaching these boot camps, these 3-day boot camps on buying homes, flipping homes, wholesaling homes, all of that. And so I was making a lot of friends in different states that we're traveling to. Some of my friends were teaching with me. And what we did is we ended up picking up properties from banks in different states that were just incredible deals. And some of them that I started picking up were in Chicago, in South Chicago. And South Chicago can change very much block by block. You can have a few blocks where it's just really rough, really bad. And then you can have some really, really nice blocks. And I was focusing on buying in the nicer blocks, and we were renovating these properties and renting them out mostly to affordable housing, to Section 8. So the government was paying the rent. And there was one property, it was a 2-unit. I mean, the numbers were so good on it. I bought it for like $20,000. I put about, let's say, $50,000 into it. It needed a lot of work. And we rented both units out for $1,050 a month to 2 Section 8 tenants. The government was paying 100% of the rent.
Wow.
So it was just basically guaranteed rent. And it was a great deal. And then what happened is a gang member moved into one of the properties next door. And I think he just got out of jail. And unfortunately, when you get out of jail, you can't get a job. And so a lot of times the only thing they can turn to is back to the gang for money and all of that. And so the gang started hanging out at the property next door, and then they moved onto our front porch. And one of the tenants called and said, "Hey, we've got a gang hanging out on our front porch. They're selling drugs. They're carrying guns. We're scared to death. And if you can't deal with this, we're going to move out." And I thought, oh no, like if they move out, then, the gang can basically move into the property, and then the government will protect them as squatters. Yeah. And that was the last thing I wanted, was that to happen. So I called the police, and the police said, "There's not much we can do. When we drive to your property, they have lookouts that will warn them that we're coming, and they hide everything by the time we get there. Do you have a vacant unit we could set up surveillance in?" And I said, "I don't have a vacant unit, and I don't want to have a vacant unit."
Yeah, I'm trying to avoid that.
Yeah. So we didn't know what to do. And I started scratching my head. And then I started researching on the internet about security guards. And it's amazing what the sort of security forces you can hire on the internet. But I found a guy that was Chicago PD, and he's for hire when he's off duty. He's an off-duty police officer when he checks out, and you can hire him. And
Wow.
he told, yeah, it's just awesome. And he told me that he would come to the property, works 4-hour shifts, $50 an hour, something like that. And he would show up, and he would show up with a cop car. And he also said if anyone messed with him, the entire police force will back him up, because even though he's off duty, he's still a police officer, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking, so you're telling me I can basically I'm hiring the entire
Cops.
Chicago police force for $50 an hour? I'm like,
Yeah.
you're hired. This is amazing. And so I had him go there to the property prime party hours. I said, show up Thursday night, just show up at like 9 p.m., stay till like 1, show up Friday night, show up Saturday night. And he did. The first night he was there, he steps out of the car, and one of the kids started talking trash to him, and they interact. The kid gets taken in first night. Then second night he's there happened to be some sort of shooting happened on the street. 2 more people got arrested. Third night, everyone's gone. Fourth night, everyone's gone. Problem solved. It took 4 nights, and they never came back. Basically, you can't sell drugs when there's a cop hanging out on your street, right? So it shut down their business, and the problem was solved. My tenants were happy. They ended up staying. They ended up, not vacating the property. And that was just a huge lesson learned, that you can actually hire off-duty police officers. And I've used that now 2 times, where I've hired an off-duty police officer to help me deal with a situation. I would never recommend to go into any of those type of situations on your own. You have some of these landlords, they'll go in, they'll be like, oh, I'll deal with this, right? Don't do it. You can literally risk your life.
Yeah. Well, especially Chicago. I mean, that's like, I've heard so many gun deaths in Chicago in the space of just 12 months and stuff. So.
Yeah. I'm not there anymore, but any of those environments where I would say to a property owner where you're dealing with a tenant that you just don't know, you can literally show up with either don't show up at all and have a security person deal with it. Of course, you have to follow the laws. But there was another situation where anytime I showed up at the property, I came with the off-duty police officer. He came with me. And you can solve those situations really quick. One thing that you are entitled to is to do inspections. Yeah. And so I'm not entitled, if a squatter does get into the unit, I'm not allowed to just kick them out, right? I have to go through the proper procedures of eviction or whatever, but I am allowed to do inspections. And so we started doing routine inspections, and we started going through the unit and checking for plumbing leaks, checking the smoke detector, checking all kinds of stuff. And I had the officer with me, and it just made them miserable really quick. And then we were able to negotiate. This is another situation I'm talking about now, but we were able to negotiate cash for keys, which I just said to them, hey guys, you're kind of making us miserable. We're kind of making you miserable. I've got, $400 that I'm going to give to a judge this week to evict you guys. It's just, I have to do it. It's part of my job, but I'd rather give that $400 to you if you're out by Friday. What do you think? And they took it. They said, we'll be out by Friday. And every time I went to that property, I had the off-duty police officer with me. And so
just gives you that sense of comfort that,
Exactly. Problem solved and lesson learned for me.
Yeah. And tell me this, when you were buying in Chicago, you were using a local agent?
Yes, we were.
And did those guys know that there was, potential gang issues and stuff like that in that area?
Yeah. So I had a local agent and I had a property management company. And to be honest, I think, let me just cut to what the lesson learned in this situation. The big lesson learned is for long distance investing. So I was in California.
That's what I was going to ask you. Yeah.
Chicago.
Long distance. Yeah.
For long distance investing, to never do it where I'm investing in a lower income situation. There might be exceptions to that rule, but generally when I'm investing long distance, I want to be in an A location with A tenants, or just don't even invest long distance, because the drama that you'll experience in a lower income neighborhood, and sometimes it goes really well. I've had a lot of situations where I did affordable housing long distance and it went really well, but then I've had other situations where literally, the house got shot up by, a drive-by shooting, and and it was on the news. So long time doing this, lesson learned is now if I go long distance, it's going to be in an A location. And maybe I get a property that I can still add value to, but I want to have just a demographic of tenants that are more stable, that have jobs, that don't have gang activity, just that type of stuff. Yeah.
Checklist, no gangs, please. Yeah. I was just thinking about in terms of the distance, because I have got coaching clients and things that they do look at properties that are cheaper in other areas.
Mm-hmm.
And the issue is just when it comes to the management kind of headaches that can take place when you have to, Chicago from California is quite a distance. It's several hours of a flight, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And so, what were the criteria that made you want to jump into a deal? Because it would obviously have to be a significant profit maker in order to warrant that hassle factor.
Yeah, you get sucked in by the numbers, but the numbers are often a facade. So you think about it. I bought that 2-unit for $20-something thousand. I put
so it looks like a great bargain. Yeah,
I put 50 into it, so I'm into it for 70. Let's just say 80 with holding costs, and I rent each unit for $1,050, and it's government guaranteed rent. That is so tempting to build a portfolio like that.
Yeah.
But the drama that we went through,
because that's about a 30% yield, isn't it, or something?
Yeah. The yield is incredible. But then the drama that you go through, or if that tenant moves out and then the unit gets sacked, or squatters move in, or the gang, that sort of stuff immediately wipes out all that gain you thought you were going to get. And it adds a ton of drama and stress, which is even more important than the money, to be going through that type of stress long distance. That eventually just made it not worth it. That's where it's like, okay, you know what? If I'm going to go distance with my investments, then I'm going to go with a location. And now I'm to the point where I will only go with, large multifamily, because I want a professional management company managing the entire property.
Yeah.
But I still have one single family home that, that's just been, I've had the same tenant in it for like a decade, and it's been easy to manage. But generally speaking, you got to be careful with the distance, and you want to stick in, as good of a location as possible. Don't get sucked in. The house that I mentioned that had the drive-by shooting, I bought that house for $5,000.
Okay.
And I got sucked in by the numbers. My property manager said, "Hey, I'll manage it for you. This house is $5,000." So I bought it for $5,000. I think we put 15 into it. So we're in it for 20. And sure enough, it rented right away for 675. Still really good numbers. But then 9 months later, I got a call, and my property manager said, "Hey, your property was on the news last night."
Shut up.
Because they drove by and shot it up, and the tenant ran and it's vacant now. And so you lose whatever gain you thought you were going to get that year. Yeah. So I just sold it. I got my money back. I didn't lose anything, but it's just not worth it.
And tell me, Alan, do you invest in commercial property? You have a commercial background given your agency, but do you actually buy commercial?
I've toyed with the idea. I bought large multifamily, but I have not bought any office. I'm glad I don't have office right now.
Yeah.
But I've not bought any office or retail or industrial. But I'm really intrigued by it, and I would like to at some point maybe add that to my portfolio. But what I've liked about multifamily is, like I said earlier, I just sailed right through the recession with multifamily.
Yeah.
Because people need a place to live. And if you're not in the high-end luxury, but you're in somewhat of a middle ground, then you generally stay full during a recession, because people need a place to live. And so
Yeah. No, it
commercial,
absolutely. I'd agree with you there. I mean, the way I've built my portfolio over the past is to kind of mix the two because I like the income certainty from residential,
yeah,
but then if you want to have outsized returns, commercial is the way to go.
yeah,
I've done deals where I I quadrupled my money in 2 years in a commercial unit, and
yeah,
I bought it for 600,000. So we weren't talking small money. And
yeah,
this thing, you could never quadruple the value of a residential property.
right,
And the work to achieve that was just to build 3 walls and split the unit into multiple smaller units, and then just
totally,
lease it up and then sell it off as an investment, and huge increases in value.
yes.
And
And
but
I've been
then
thinking about doing exactly that.
well, that's it. It's the arbitrage where you buy something that's priced as a large unit, split it into
Hmm.
multiple units, and then
Hmm.
you can kind of. I did that twice, 3 times, did really, really well, and then I bought one. And it's funny, you were saying earlier that you fall in love with the numbers, and that's you get intoxicated by the numbers. Like I saw another property very similar, commercial property in a rough part of town, and I saw it. It was 500,000 to buy, and I had a tenant ready to move into it. And the moment they signed, the moment the ink was dry in the lease, that property was worth 1.2 million. And so I was thinking, I'm going to double my money here very quickly. And so I tried to get them to sign a lease agreement in advance of me buying it, but there was delays and stuff. So I had to close the deal and buy the property. And then I was waiting for them to sign. And long story short, they pulled out of the deal, and I was left with an empty unit that I paid 500,000 for. And I was like, okay, I'll try and find another tenant. And I didn't realize there was guys selling drugs on the corner right outside. And there was every time a person pulled up to have a look at the unit, their car would get broken into. And it was just became a nightmare. 12 years later, I managed to exit that deal for 100,000, 400,000 loss, and 12 years of holding costs. Like it was. So, you really do have to, sort of thread carefully with commercial, but when it goes right, it goes beautifully,
Yeah.
Very.
Yeah. That's so true. And going back to that model, I love that model, especially right now. I think there's a trend towards people having small commercial space, especially if it's like a flex type space with a roll up door.
Yeah.
That stuff's beautiful. It's in high demand all across the country. You do want to be in a location where there isn't high crime, because generally the people that are going to rent those types of spaces are going to be your contractors, which there's tons of, right? It's your plumbers, your electricians, wood floor installers, even like you're seeing now CrossFit gyms and yoga gyms and all. They're going into those type of spaces where it's a small space that a small business owner can afford, and it's got some sort of roll up door or high ceilings and that type of feel.
And it's just secure. As long as they're
totally secure.
Mm-hmm. Because contractors, the big concern is all of their equipment getting lifted, and that's it. Yeah. And Alan, I remember reading in your backstory, you also had an issue with hurricane damage or something like that. Tell us about that. That sounds like an exotic deal.
Yes. Yeah, you love dragging me through all my past pain, don't you?
Yeah. It's all about the resilience. You see, it's like if we all talk about our successes, nobody wants to hear it. They want to hear the horror stories,
It's so true. I love it. I love learning from other people's challenges. And so, Hurricane Harvey, that was 2017. I'll never forget that week. Basically, I had moved towards selling my 48 unit in Texas. I put it on the market. I needed the money because I bought a 74 unit in Tulsa, Oklahoma that I was renovating. And it was pretty run down. And so we needed to move the cash. So I put it on the market and I got 3 offers, and I was reviewing those offers. And then like literally Thursday, I got the offers. I was reviewing them on Friday, and Hurricane Harvey's approaching the property. And Friday night, Hurricane Harvey hits the town it's in, which was Victoria, Texas. And it sits there the hurricane sits there all weekend long for 3 days, just hovering around that city. My maintenance guy is calling me, and he's like this tough old Texan guy, and he's just like screaming. He's like, you wouldn't believe it. He's like, the rain. He was sending me videos of the rain was going completely horizontal. It wasn't even touching the ground because of the way the hurricane was whipping through the town. Right. The rain was going this way, and he's sending me videos of the rain. He's sending me videos of the street, which looked like a river, and trees falling over. Wow. And I just thought, oh no. And I get a call from my agent that he says, hey, the offers are gone. Everyone's backing out.
Of course. Yeah.
The hurricane leaves, and we're just left to pick up the pieces, and it's a mess. I had part of the roof blown off, 4 of the units completely destroyed. Another part of the building, the entire wall got ripped off. I had trees all over the place, looked like a war zone. Yeah. And I couldn't even get to the property for weeks because the roads were closed going in and all of this stuff. Yeah. And so we called our insurance company, right? And the insurance company did not return our call for probably like 3 or 4 weeks. I'm just doing, damage control. And so eventually they call us back. They say someone's going to come out and inspect. Well, they keep saying that and canceling it. And so then I hire what's called a public adjuster. And a public adjuster is someone that used to work for the insurance companies, but now they're for hire by private individuals to negotiate with the insurance company. Because I'm thinking, this is not going well. And I've never dealt with a situation this big. And that's one lesson learned, is when you go into a situation that's big like that and you feel in over your head, look for people that you can pull from, experts, mentors, whatever. But I basically got this public adjuster. He'd been doing it for insurance industry for 20 years. And he was negotiating on my behalf, and he was going to get maybe 10% of whatever claim we got total. Right. And he was going to take all the workload off of me. And so he started working on it. He worked on it for like a month. And then he called me and said, look, these guys are playing games. They're saying they're going to show up. They don't show up. They're totally overwhelmed. And they offered me at that point, I think $90,000, but it was about $200 and something thousand in damage. Wow. And so we turned them down. We said, you're joking. And they said, no, that's our final offer. And so the adjuster told me that I needed an attorney. He's like, you need an attorney. This is ridiculous. They're totally hoping you're going to take this money and leave them alone. And he knew an attorney that all this guy did was hurricanes and insurance companies. And so I'm like, that's my guy. And so I called the attorney, and of course he was incredibly busy. And he said that he takes 40% of what he gets from the insurance company. And I was like, whoa, 40%. I'm like,
you're nearly at that 90,000 already. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, that's a massive commission. And he said, well, hold on, let me explain. The 90,000 you've already got, I'm not taking any of that. That you've already got that. Whatever I get you above the 90, I'm going to take 40% of. But I am so good at this, and I've done this for so long, that I will get you what you need to get and my fee on top of it. Okay. And you won't have anything to do except sign a couple pieces of paper. And I'm
confident.
Okay, that sounds pretty good. And then he said, who's your insurance company? And I told him, and he goes, yep, I know them. I've sued them before and I won. And I'm like, you've got the job, right? So sure enough, unfortunately it took, like another 7 months because of the legal system, it takes a while. Yeah. But sure enough, 7 months later, we won, and I got every dollar I should have gotten. It's unfortunate that it took 7 months, and I almost went bankrupt during that 7 months because I had now a crisis situation there that I was shelling out money for. And then I had the 74 unit we were rehabbing and doing a ton of work on, and I was shelling out money there, and it was just too much. It was too much money going out, and I'm just holding on, waiting for this legal case to get settled. Wow. And we made it, but it wasn't easy, but a lot of lessons learned.
And telling me this, Alen, that's a great segue into a question I'd like to ask you about resilience around real estate. everyone wants to get into it until something goes wrong, and then they regret the day they heard the word real estate. I mean, how do you deal with those? I mean, almost going bankrupt. I came very close to it as well. And I mean, it lasted for years in my case, not 7 months. I mean, it was the best part of 5 years of being in a negative net worth kind of territory and stuff.
Yeah.
And very stressful, very damaging to, my marriage fell apart. I lost the family home. There was an awful lot of problems as a result of all of that.
Yeah.
And now I consider myself to be kind of a strong-minded, resilient person. Do you have any, like, how would you suggest is the best way to deal with that kind of stress that you're referring to?
Yeah.
Grab the surfboard and
Gosh,
take to the waves.
absolutely. That's the first thing I was going to say is, for me, I hold stress on the inside. So I come from a German family, all the way back to German farmers. And what we know about the Germans is they are non-emotional. And, I think I just hold inside my stress, and the best way for me to deal with it is to physically move my body. And so surfing has been huge, swimming's been huge, but really anything. I could go play pickleball or, tennis, whatever, anything where I'm just physically pushing myself to the point of exhaustion. I've found that then when I get on the other side of that exhaustion, I feel like that stress has left my body, and that's been huge. I think also, there's a spiritual component for it to me as well. So like I ultimately get to a point where I have to rest and realize that God's in control, even when it seems like he's not. And, that's part of where I can actually let go of things, because there's only so much I can do. I'm only human, right? And to a certain point, I can do what I can do. And then I have to let go, and I have to go and I have to be with my family. I have to be a dad. I have to be a husband. If I carry all that stuff with me in those environments, it's going to start causing toxicity in those environments, right? So those are two, I think, very, very practical things that have been helpful for me. And then also realizing, there's like this old, whatever, Chinese proverb or something, but that says crisis creates opportunity. But I do like that mindset, that where something majorly goes wrong, and if you look at it and maybe even detach yourself emotionally from it and think, okay, getting through this may just open up an incredible opportunity in another avenue or in this avenue that I'm in. But I've found that to be true many times, that when something majorly goes wrong, it just opens up something else that you weren't even predicting could happen. Those are a few things that have helped me.
Those are great. Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on in terms of physical exertion. That's the same for me. I just do, triathlon events or whatever, some sort of exertion, and that helps. In terms of, you've been successful in property, in real estate. I mean, can you tell us what would be one of those habits or behaviors that you have that has, in your opinion, been the biggest driver of success?
Yeah. Wow. I don't know what the greatest, one is, but I'll give you one really, really good one that I've been working my way through, especially in this past season, which is limiting beliefs. So realizing that I have limiting beliefs in my thought process, some of which people have told me and I've grasped onto it. And I'll give you some examples, others which I've just made up on my own because I just don't think that it's possible. And those things are traveling around in my subconscious, and they're actually holding me back from doing things. So a limiting belief would be to someone listening to this and thinking, wow, it's incredible what these guys have done. I could never do that. Or I could never do that because, and there's a reason, like because I have bad credit, or because I have, who knows? I mean, maybe they even have a criminal record, or whatever situation or whatever thing that they're believing, that they think that because of this, I could never do fill in the blank. And I think we all have those. And it's good to kind of go through the garden and weed those out and realize that that's not true, that it's not true that even if I have bad credit, I can't buy a property. Even if the shift is to say, okay, you know what? I have bad credit. I just went through health issues. I just went through divorce, whatever you just went through. And because of that, maybe I can't buy a property the traditional way through a bank, but how could I buy a property? So you actually shift it and you think, okay, there's still, I know there's still ways to do this because there's people out there doing it without banks. So start thinking around how could I, rather than this is why I can't, and start looking for the answers. And it's amazing because your brain, your subconscious will actually start working on that problem solving when you're sleeping. Like literally our brains are kind of wired to solve problems. And then you can study, you can get mentors, you can do all kinds of stuff to figure out, well, how could I, even though I have this problem or this challenge, how could I still do it? And that's been a big journey for me. And it's a constant journey, I think, for all of us.
I think you're right. I think that's a really valuable insight because I've seen it as well. I mean, a lot of people I am dealing with, clients that come in for some coaching or something like that, and they will be saying, oh, well, I come from a background where, I have no formal education or I didn't go to college or something. And they think that is a blockade or something. And you kind of say, but hold on a sec. Once you open their eyes and say, but this chap over here, he's exactly the same as you, is a tradesperson just like you. And he's doing really, really well. And this is what he does. And next minute, their eyes are open. It's like a shroud has been lifted and they suddenly realize, wow. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, it's very, very good insight there, Alan. And we're coming towards the end of our time. I just there's a couple of questions I like to ask. First of all, the economy has gone through a bit of a hit, we'll say. Certainly that's the perception. Certainly the office sector, I can tell you, as an office landlord, it's pretty tough out there. But a lot of people feeling the pain with interest rates having shot up and things like that. How are you dealing with that? Do you see that as an opportunity or do you see that as a test or a challenge?
It's both, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
The Federal Reserve, their main weapon against inflation is to raise interest rates. And they're just wielding that weapon. And typically what the Federal Reserve does is when they do something, they overextend it longer than is necessary till they experience other problems. So for example, when they dropped the interest rates so incredibly low, they kind of did it for too long, is a lot of what the opinion of economists are. And then now we're the other way, right? Now they're like, now they're going to raise interest rates and they're going to probably do it for a long time. But I have to say, as an investor, that means there is huge opportunities in this for me. And with some of them, there's probably some I haven't even discovered yet, but some of the main opportunities are there's less buyers to compete with. And that is massive for me because when I went to make an offer on a property in California a year and a half ago, there was 20 offers, 20. Yeah. And I can't compete with 20 offers, especially when 90% of them are like people that would pay more than makes sense. Yeah. And they're all emotionally into it. As an investor, I'm out of the game when there's 20 offers. And so when there's 0 offers, all of a sudden things can get very creative. Price can get creative, terms can get creative, the way it's finding, all kinds of creative things could happen. So that's a massive opportunity right there. When there's fear in the market, fear of high interest rates, fear of what's going on, as an investor, it creates opportunity.
Yeah, no, for sure. And also, one of the things that I like to kind of tell people is it's not resources are rarely the problem. It's a lack of resourcefulness. It's just not thinking around the problem and just like looking at it as an obstacle rather than thinking about solutions.
So good.
Alan, in terms of a question I ask all my guests, you're an experienced guy now, 23 years in the business. What advice would you give young Alan, 18 years of age, starting out, like knowing now what you know? What advice would you give yourself looking back?
Yeah. My situation is maybe a little more unique, but because just being in California, but I'm sure some of your listeners are also in California. So I think I would have stayed more local. I went into 9 different states during the recession. I just got excited. We were picking up properties so cheap from these banks.
Yeah.
And I think I spread myself out too much, too thin into, in one state I had like one property, one little home, And so I think I spread myself out too thin. If I just would have stayed in California, I would have also got much greater appreciation. So on the coast, when you're on the water or, anywhere close to the ocean, usually your cash flow is tighter, but your appreciation can be greater. Historically, it's always been greater than other locations. And so I think that if I would have just stuck with California, I would have also bought less properties, because in the Midwest, I was buying them for, less than 100,000. Here I buy one for, 600,000. I would have had less properties. It would have been easier to manage. I would have been in better locations. So I think a lot of it has been just not being, drawn in by these incredible numbers in these rough locations, and rather being in better locations, maybe even higher prices. Maybe on the books, it looks like I'm going to make less cash flow, but the reality is I'm going to probably do even better than those lower priced properties. That's been a big lesson learned.
Great stuff. Well, Alen, thank you so much for your time. How can people find or learn more about you? What's the best way?
Yeah, a great place is YouTube. YouTube.com/Al Siebes. It's my nickname. It's spelled ALSIEBS. That's a great place to find.
I'll put a link in the show notes to bring you through. I'm on YouTube as well, so I'll click in and become a subscriber of yours.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I tell a lot of stories on there. It's fun to teach and talk through stories, real estate stories. So thanks so much for having me.
Alen, it's been a pleasure, and good luck with everything. And if you're ever bringing the surfboard across to this side of the world, I'd be happy to show you around a couple of surf spots.
Sounds good. Love it.
Take care. Thanks.
You too.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Alen today. If you did, please leave a like by clicking on the link below. And if you could, it would be great if you could maybe leave a review. And the reviews really help us. So either a comment down below or some sort of review, 5-star if you don't mind. Speak to you soon.